So my name is Brooke Oliveri. I am the manager of the Long Island Health Collaborative. Just so everyone is aware, we are recording this meeting as you just heard. So by staying in the meeting, you are consenting to being part of the recording. Thank you so much for joining us today. As you can see, we are going to be presenting about staying safe on our streets. This is all about pedestrian and bike safety. And the Walk Safe Long Island initiative is brought to you today by the Long Island Health Collaborative and the New York Coalition for Transportation Safety. So a little more about our individual organizations here. The New York Coalition for Transportation Safety, they work to improve pedestrian, bike, traffic safety, not only on Long Island, but throughout New York. And the Long Island Health Collaborative, we are an organization of 300 plus community-based organizations, health service organizations, really a wide spectrum of organizations that all work together to improve the health and wellness of Long Islanders. And as I mentioned, we work together as a team to bring you the Walk Safe Long Island initiative. So before we get started, I'm going to introduce our panel here. First up, we have Cynthia Brown. She is the Executive Director of NYCTS, the New York Coalition for Transportation Safety. We're also joined by Mark Hoffaker. He is a Program Director at NYCTS. We would be joined by Lowell Wolf. He is not with us today, but he is a Program Director at NYCTS as well. And Lynn Margaret Brown, very important member of the team behind the scenes. And we're also joined by Liz Lee, who will be presenting on the panel as well today. Before I turn it over to Cindy, please feel free to submit any questions you may have in the chat, and we will be sure to answer those as we go along. So before we do get to the presentation, we have some brief poll questions for you to answer, just to get a feel of your experience with pedestrian safety, bike safety. So I'm going to launch those polls right now if our attendees would be kind enough to give us some feedback there. I'll give it about a minute just to make sure everyone has time to read and respond. Okay. All right, it's been about a minute. I see we got some answers there. Thank you so much for your feedback. And without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Cindy.
All right, actually, I think Liz is going to do this piece today.
I will turn it over to Liz in that case.
I'm next.
Okay.
Go ahead, Liz.
To educate the public about the vehicle and traffic laws and that pertain to pedestrian, bicyclists, and motorists, to reduce the number of pedestrian, bicycle deaths and injuries on Long Island, and to provide best practices information to keep pedestrians and bicyclists safe, and to familiarize you with new electronic powder transportation devices such as e-bikes, scooters, and mopeds, and their impact on pedestrian safety. They're getting more popular. You might see them pop up in your towns, and they're fairly cheap, so they might be coming soon, more and more, and to recognize how COVID-19 has impacted traffic safety.
Next.
As you see, one reason we're having this presentation is look at how many pedestrians have been hit And that's not all of them. There's some that are not even on there. A guy was hit and killed on Hempstead Turnpike in Levittown crossing his bike. He was hit by a Mack truck. And there were many more accidents that the news just don't report. So as you see, we need to have these presentations to help people be more aware of their surroundings and so we have less people hit by cars and bicyclists hit by cars. You don't want to be a stat being one of those people that it says you were the pedestrian struck by the car. We want to try to prevent that. So that's why we're having this presentation. Okay. Next.
Okay, one of the things we want to do, the main purpose of the presentation is to really help you increase your knowledge of what New York State laws actually exist that are intended to make the roadway safer for pedestrians and bicyclists. This has been an absolutely awful year. It is being reported constantly about what a bad year 2020 was. For even though there were so many less cars on the road, there were so many more people killed. And so, you know, as this says, pedestrian deaths have surged around the country. All the data reported, whether it's Center for Disease Control, who does the fatality, it's called FARS data. They keep all the fatal accidents for every country, every state in the country. Or whether it's the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, who is the federal agency charged with tracking this kind of information. Everybody who does it, National Safety Council, everybody's numbers are just way up by almost 10%.
Yeah, and Cindy, if I could, I just
yeah.
want to add, if you add the last slide, those headlines, and this second one about pedestrians at a higher rate, we're seeing a lot of hit and runs.
Yes.
And the pandemic, one contributing factor in terms of the pandemic is when there's less people out, there's less eyes on the road. So some people might, you know, hit a bike and no one's around, so they're taking off. So that's a result. And then there's always been a problem with hit and runs. This is very unfortunate that if it's a case of intoxication, unfortunately, a lot of people know that, I hate to say this, but they might even be better off to leave the scene of that crime. They could even come back the next day, turn themselves in. But if they've sobered up, the police, you know, can't charge them with a DWI. They might get leaving the scene of a crime, which is a misdemeanor. And so a lot of hit and runs. It's really a shame that there's such a high rate of hit and runs these days.
Yeah, and actually, all the data suggests that the increase in pedestrian, motor vehicle, bicycle deaths, the two primary causes are speed and alcohol. Next. All right, now these are some of the laws I mentioned before that are really intended to make it a little safer for a pedestrian to cross the street. The New York State law says if you're in a crosswalk, you have the right of way. Motorists have the right of way at all locations other than intersections and marked crosswalks. But even though they're supposed to stop with you, for you, when you're in a crosswalk, I would still tell you to not assume that a vehicle will stop for you, that you're in a crosswalk. You know, you can't be too careful. Like it says, drivers are supposed to yield to pedestrians in a crosswalk at an unmarked crossing. But again, I would tell you, and we'll talk about this more in a little while, there's a lot of things that you can do to protect yourself, and to just step out because you assume you have the right of way is very dangerous. You should always obey the walk, don't walk signs. And those are the traffic signals. Not every intersection has one, but most intersections that are heavily traveled will have, they will be signalized. So the vehicles will see a red light, green light to go, and you should have a walk, don't walk sign. In many areas of the state, I realize there aren't always sidewalks available, but if there is, you're supposed to walk on it and use it. Don't walk in the street. And if you can't have a sidewalk to use, you should always walk facing traffic. That is actually in the law. Pedestrians have a right of way when a car is pulling in or out of traffic across the sidewalk. Again, this would probably apply to, let's say, a driveway, somebody backing out, or a parking lot. I mean, you might have the right of way, but it doesn't mean that the driver sees you. So you have to be very careful. Pedestrians are not allowed on limited access roads such as expressways and interstates, and they're not allowed on entrance or exit ramps for those roads. I do realize that sometimes it's unavoidable if you get a flat tire or your car breaks down, but it's extremely dangerous. There are several overpasses named for police officers who were struck along the highway because of being struck by a drunk driver or somebody that didn't see them while they had pulled over to help somebody or sight somebody. Next. All right, Mark, you want to talk about
Sure.
this? This is your library.
Yeah,
in
yeah.
action.
I was in Bellport yesterday, so some of these pictures are pretty new, but it's a very attractive, library that you have there. You have two major roads, right by the library. You got nice sculpture, in the front, a nice peace garden in the front. Next, let me show you, make a few points. You have a bike rack. The middle photo shows you the bike rack you have in the middle, which I'm sure. I found it a little interesting that there's another bike rack on the side of, and I guess that's really for employees. And I heard that some of the employees do ride their bikes, to the library there. So you actually have a lot of bike parking. I walked around the neighborhood a little bit, got a few more pictures, make a few more points. I thought this was, go back to the last one, Brooke, if you don't mind, just to show that at your bus stop, that's a nice little rest stop you have there, but I have a feeling that it's not compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. I don't know when that was built, because it doesn't allow for somebody in a wheelchair to be in that bus shelter, but it is nice that it's there. Next. So on the left, I like the fact that somebody there in your parking lot tried to create a crosswalk. You see the stop sign there. That seems, one thing I would say, let me make this point. I mean, this presentation is about saying stay on the streets, but parking lots are very dangerous. A lot of the injuries that happen, if somebody gets hit by a car, don't get reported. I would imagine the fact that your library is next to the post office, probably the post office generates maybe a good amount of car traffic. I saw, a bunch of people sort of pulling in, cars idling, running into the post office. But, you did park. One of the reasons parking lots can be dangerous is there's no place for pedestrians to walk. Someone tried to create it here in your parking lot, but be careful in your parking lot. The middle one I put in, it's close to your library. I just love that little pedestrian crossing sign you had there. It's like very vintage. It's pretty old, but and actually when you leave the library on the not the main road, the other one, you got a sign up that says pedestrian crossings with with the crosswalk. Your main intersection in the town there, this picture doesn't show you too well, but that is, if you see the walkman across the crosswalk, I think it's orange, you do have, I mean, Cindy will talk more about this, but I saw that it happens automatically. You don't have to press the button. The walkman comes on automatically. It has a countdown signal. Your crosswalks, that's pretty well painted crosswalk there. I would say this, and at least from, well, I've seen this in other parts of Nassau County, the places on Long Island where the walkman is automated, you don't have to press the button. The reason they did that, because those were intersections maybe where a lot of pedestrians had been struck. So they haven't automated all of them. They haven't done countdown signals on all of them. But you do have it right there. I'm not sure about your other streets. And the other thing, in my short period of time there, I noticed this was pretty interesting. Like Liz talked about micromobility. I saw a few e-bikes, parked. I saw somebody, that intersection on the right there came on. It was sort of like a Segway that she was on, standing, motorized. So I was a little, in a short period of time, I saw, and we're going to talk more about micromobility in a few minutes, but I saw it seems like it's there in Bellport. Next.
All right. This is perhaps a little bit more rural, like your neighborhood, although these pictures were not taken in your neighborhood. But it's really to show you the type of areas where it's safe to cross and where it's really not so safe to walk. In the picture on your left, you see that there's a large group of people. They're crossing in a crosswalk. There's a traffic signal there. There's a walk sign there. Many of them have on bright colored clothing. Even some of their shoes are bright colored. So they're, as a group, very easy to see, and it makes it really pretty safe to cross like that. So whenever it's possible, if there's more than one of you crossing, it's a good idea because it just makes you more visible. The picture on the right-hand side is a same kind of an area, but without sidewalks. And this lady is walking in the right direction. She's walking with traffic, but there's no sidewalk. She has to use a walker. She's probably not really very visible at all. And it's very hard for someone to navigate an area like that, especially if they have a disability. So if it's at all possible and you find yourself in these kind of circumstances, you should really advocate for at least better road striping so that a car that's coming would have, she's on the wrong side of the road to begin with. She should actually be facing the traffic. Right. But, the best, I'm assuming that she chose this route because it was just more convenient and easier and she didn't have to cross the street to walk in the direction she's going. But she's supposed to be facing the car, not have the car at her back. Next. All right, again, this is just a picture of a very similar area, possibly before and after. One shows it without sidewalks, one shows it with sidewalks. So this doesn't look like a particularly busy section, but it could just be the time of day that the pictures were taken. So it's quite possible that at other times it's very busy, especially with traffic. So I don't even believe they would have put in a sidewalk if there wasn't enough people that they thought would have used it. So it probably went a long way to making this much safer for pedestrians. Excuse me, next. All right, Liz.
This is when you go to the crosswalk, what you see here is the crosswalk button, and we have some recommendations for you. So make sure you push the button to get the walk icon. You want to make sure you get it before you cross the street. Don't cross the street before that signal comes. Once the walk icon comes, cross the street, but make sure, one thing to make sure to definitely watch out for is left turning vehicles in general, but make sure to watch out for left turning ones because many people get hit in the crosswalks when cars are making a left turn. Also be aware that trucks and buses can always see you when you are close to them because their vision, they may not see you. Try to signal to the driver, maybe you could make eye contact that you're going to be crossing in front of them so that they see you. And if you're walking slowly or required to use a cane or walker, always make sure you have extra time before you're crossing. Like if it's in the middle of the time, you shouldn't cross, you should wait for it to start again. You shouldn't cross when it's in the middle of the time. You want to give yourself ample amount of time to cross. You can do next.
Okay, now these are some roadway designs and devices that can make it easier, are intended to make it easier and safer for you to cross the street. A road diet is intended to slow down vehicles and the number of lanes that a pedestrian has to cross. And usually this is done by road striping, or it's done by extending the curb out so that you're actually further out into the street and you have a less of a distance to cross. It can also be done like the next one says, by pedestrian refuge. Most pedestrian refuge islands are in the middle of a street that is possibly 4 lanes or 6 lanes, and it anticipates the fact that you may not be able to get all the way across on one traffic signal. So it's intended to be there to give you a safe place to stop if you can't get all the way across on one light. And lights are intended to be timed to the width of the roads or the number of lanes on a road, but not everybody can walk at the same speed. What a child could cross on it, or a 10 or a 12-year-old, a 70-year-old is very highly unlikely that they could walk it as quickly. There are raised crosswalks that have are made of a different texture. Sometimes the street could be asphalt or concrete and the crosswalk may be brick. Other times it's just slightly raised, or it's colored in different paints or designs. But this one is primarily, it would be either concrete or brick to raise it above the height of the regular road, but not to the height of being considered a speed bump. And then there are crosswalk visibility enhancements such as lighting and enhanced signing. I don't know if you have any in your neighborhood, but there are now stop signs with flashing lights around them so that cars can, more easily, especially at night, notice a stop sign, because a lot of times the colors on the signs fade with age. So the lights really attract your attention to it. And there's lots of new kinds of pedestrian crossing signs, and again with lights that if you have one, it's probably a good place to try to cross, because they would only place it where they know, where the local and traffic engineers would know that there have been crashes. And then probably the best thing that they've come up with in years is something called a leading pedestrian interval, LPIs. And what this is it's a traffic signal with a walk light on it, where the pedestrian gets the walk sign before the car gets a green light to go. And this is great in really busy intersections, because you will be able to have at least a 10 or 12 second lead on any vehicle, because any vehicle, even if they're allowed to make a right on red, should not be able to do this on these kind of signals. And it should say, the signal itself, there should be a sign saying no right on red permitted, because it would defeat the whole purpose of this. But they're really very good, and you watch them and they count down, and I'm sorry, they don't count down, they stay on, and then the countdown comes on to tell you exactly how much more time you have left to cross the street. Okay, next.
All right, so now we'll talk a little bit about some bike laws. And the first point that I'd like to make, I don't know if you can see this, but this is New York State Vehicle and Traffic Law. It's pretty thick. Most of us who are drivers, we had to study parts of this when we got our license, but there are an awful lot of laws in here related to bicycles. So one good concept before we get into a few specific laws is to think of your bicycle as a vehicle. It's most of them are non-motorized vehicles, and you have to follow a lot of the same laws that cars might have. The first being, like the first one says, look at these little diagrams here. A cyclist is supposed to stop at a stop sign. A cyclist is supposed to stop at a red light. A cyclist is supposed to yield. I don't know that they do all the time, but technically, because they're being sort of treated like cars, they are supposed to do that. If I jump to the third bullet and look at these diagrams again, the cyclists, when you're riding on the streets, older teens and adults who are not using the sidewalk, using the streets, they ride the same way cars go. Cindy mentioned if pedestrians are walking because there's no sidewalk, they're supposed to face cars so they can make eye contact. But if you're riding your bicycle, by law, you have to be going the same way that cars, because you're a vehicle, and that's what cars expect. So you ride over to the right, as much as you can. This is, say a few words about the second bullet of share the road. The law says that bicycles can be on the streets. Bicycles have the right to be on the streets. But, cars have to share the road. I'm mentioning that only, actually, a law that you just passed in Suffolk County, which I think is very good. If you heard of the 3-foot law, the 3-foot law, Suffolk County is the only county in New York State that has it. It says if you're driving and there's a cyclist, to your right, you have to give them at least 3 feet if you're passing them. So, and that is a concept of share the road. And I was reading some stuff this morning where some people thought it was a bad law, it's anti-car, it's hard to do on a crowded road. But obviously it's giving a measure of safety and a level of respect and an awareness to cyclists that, that they can share the roads. In terms of helmets, which we'll talk about a little more in a second, New York State law, children under the age of 14, over the age of 1, have to be using a certified helmet. A little more than a year ago, Nassau County changed their law and they made it under the age of 18. So sometimes localities, can make their own laws. I think everybody should wear a helmet, but that's the law. Next slide, please. So if you think about your bike itself, and let's think about your car if you have a car. So by law, you must have a white reflector in the front and a red reflector in the rear. What's your car? You have headlights up in front, which are white. You have brake lights in the back, which are red. So by law, you have to have that. A lot of bikes have more reflectors. You can have spoke reflectors, which are very helpful because spoke reflectors, when you're pedaling, they move, they turn. So when the car is perpendicular, they see that, they see the reflection and it's moving. So that helps them a lot. And also very often on your pedals, you have reflectors there too. And they also moving it when you're pedaling. Cars at night, the headlights go down. So those orange, usually they're orange reflectors can help that cyclist be seen. But you at least have to have the white reflector, red reflector in the back. I'll jump to the third one because it's kind of related. If you're riding at night, a little bit before the sun goes down, just like a car, this is not reflectors, this is lights now. You have to have a white light in the front that I believe can be seen 500 feet. I doubt anybody measures that. And you have to have a red light in the back. Actually, most good cyclists who are like serious cyclists, they're starting to use their lights during the day now, just like, a lot of car drivers do. They put their lights on. You are, if it's the day, you're going to be seen a split second more. At nighttime, I just to emphasize this, if you are riding in the dark and if you don't have reflectors or lights on your bike, it is very hard, for the drivers to see you. So make sure you have your reflectors, get some lights. They're not expensive. They're very important. The law says when you're riding in the streets, cyclists can ride at most by law 2 abreast. If you're being passed by a car, you should get into a single file. Probably the most egregious non-compliance with that law are some of the bike clubs, especially on a Sunday morning. They'll take over a whole lane. There's not many cars on the road, but legally, they don't really have they don't have the right to do that by law. A little known law is that you have to have a bell or horn on your bicycle. A lot of times you buy a bike, they have the reflectors, but they may not have a bell or horn. If they don't, cost you a few bucks to add it on. Obviously you would use it in a situation, but I think it's more the concept of a vehicle, and it's the concept of communication. If you're passing somebody, maybe you use your bell. You see something dangerous, you can yell also, but it's just like a car. You honk your horn. You should have a way of communicating with other pedestrian cyclists. Next, please. So let's just say a few words about helmets. And so we talked about the law. I recommend everybody wear a helmet. Helmets are very effective in reducing your risk of brain injury. Doesn't necessarily make you a better bike rider, but if you do happen to fall, the energy of the fall gets absorbed by the helmet. And I would say, especially our work with children, we work with all ages, but you can have a helmet, but it's also, you need to wear it correctly. These diagrams show you a little bit. If you can see my helmet, a lot of helmets today are adjustable. So, I have this big head, if I have to dial it up, it's a dial. I have to make this helmet as big as I can make it. And then when I wear it, just like the diagrams you see, you're wearing it, first of all, perpendicular to the ground, or parallel to the ground. And you want to get 1 or 2 fingers from your eyebrows to the bottom of the helmet. On the side, the straps, there's a plastic piece here. A lot of times you buy them, they'll be down here. You need to slide that up so they're at the bottom of your ear. It should be like a V. And then when you clip this, you should get about 1 finger between the strap and your chin. And when you shake your head, the helmet shouldn't move that much. We see people wear helmets really loosely, not the right size. A lot of people ride helmets like this. I don't know what the purpose is. It's going to fall off. So if you have a helmet, make sure you've got the right size for you. Inside helmets, there's information, the certifying body. So you're probably going to have a certified helmet, but the date will be in there. If you have a helmet that's 10 years old, you should replace it. If you've fallen and your helmet is, hit the sidewalk, it might crack. You might not see the crack. It might be inside. Get another helmet. They're not so expensive. It's a very good investment. And if you have children, take 1 or 2 minutes to make sure that they're using their helmet correctly. If the law says if the child's not wearing a helmet, the parent pays the fine. I believe it's a $50 fine. Next. So a few words just about infrastructure. This photo on the left shows a bike lane. Actually, in Suffolk County, you have a lot of these situations. It's good there's a bike lane there, but that's really unprotected. It's just some white paint. I guess the benefit on the left there, it's showing you where you should be riding, and that's good. That car is illegally parked. New York state law, you cannot park in a bike lane. That car could get a summons. And you see how when they park, if you were riding your bike, you'd have to move out into traffic. That's why, that's the danger of that. So Suffolk actually has a fair amount of bike lanes like this. And they also have some bike routes that it may not say bike lane, but they're telling you that this is a good place to bike. But on the picture on the right, which is up around where that's 347 up North Shore. Look at this bike lane here on the right. That's a very busy road. That's an off-road bike lane. You don't have to worry about cars. You're protected. So you're going to be, it's for pedestrians and for cyclists. It was built a few years ago. It's a very nice piece of engineering work that they did on a busy road. And it's obviously a lot safer, if you're protected. You can protect bike lanes with Jersey barriers, cement. You can protect bike lanes the way people park their cars. But I mean, obviously, we'd love to see protected bike lanes. And, Suffolk is better than Nassau County in terms of the amount of mileage of bike lanes they have. Next, please. And just to show you some situations when you're riding your bike, for both of these, I guess the guys, they have one of the risks that these cyclists have is a very common thing that happens called dooring. If you're riding in traffic, you're riding on the street like you're supposed to. But if the person opens their door, they knock you down. Let's say it happened to the guy on the left and there's a car, there. I mean, he might fall down right in front of that moving car. You can see pretty clearly the one on the left. You see that they're opening up the door with the left hand. If you can, when you park, use what's called the Dutch reach. Open your door with your right hands if you're the driver, because by doing that, that forces you to move your head. You might see the cyclist or pedestrian in your peripheral vision, or you might see him in your side view mirror. And just to get back, just because I was reading about this, I was thinking about it. I have friends who don't like, the 3-foot law. So they would say, like this picture on the left, they'd say, I just, feel like picking this point. They'd say, look at that car that's driving. How could he give that person 3 feet? Well, it's pretty easy. All that car that's moving has to do is slow down. I don't know, this parked car, I don't know if there's another car in front of it. Let's say there isn't. The cyclist passed that parked car, he cuts in closer to the curb, then you can give him 3 feet. It's not that hard, to respect other people on the road and give them a little space. Next.
All right. We mentioned earlier about these micromobility devices. So here's some pictures of a couple. The bicycle, you can see by the black box that's just behind the front tire. That's probably a battery pack that operates that bike. The Segway is the little thing on the bottom with the 2 wheels, and the other is a scooter. These devices, and one that's not on here, the one that looks like a moped or I don't know, just a motorbike almost, but mopeds more than anything, are proliferating faster than I can say it. They're available now in some areas the way City Bike was for a rental for, a short trip. There is no registration required. There is no licensing required. There is no education required. There's nothing. And the greatest problem with these types of devices is there's no law, because the law to make them legal was only came into effect just about a year ago. And it's not specific as to where you have to ride. Scooters that go under a certain mileage are allowed to ride in the same lane with a person who's providing their own power to pedal the bike. The scooter and the pedestrian, and they're in many instances all in the same lane. Pedestrians are entitled to the sidewalk. That's where they're supposed to walk when there is a sidewalk, but it doesn't stop people from riding these devices on the self-same sidewalk. And it's very, very dangerous. We were at an event, a safety event 2 days ago in a very crowded area of Queens. And it was a one-way street. And this is something I want to stress. So when you go to cross a one-way street, you tend to look only in the direction you expect traffic to be coming from. People who ride bicycles, when they ride on a one-way street, if they're not going the same way as traffic, then they're going to be riding against traffic, which is something they're not supposed to do. But you're not looking for them. And these other types of vehicles, because they're electric, you do not hear them coming. And like Mark said earlier, you're supposed to have a little horn or a bell on your bike. If you're in an area that's very congested, you can't even hear that little bell that's like on a tricycle or something, let alone hear one on one of these big bikes that's coming towards you. But I would just have to tell you that even if you're on a one-way street, try to remember to look both ways before you cross, because now you're going to just have so many of these other types of devices out there that I'm afraid we're going to see more and more people run down. There have been a couple people struck by them on sidewalks already, so it's really quite dangerous. And hopefully the state will come up with some kind of guidelines as to where people who use these. I mean, there's going to be a competitive event for adults or children who ride these scooters. That's a race. They say they can go up to 60 miles an hour. Well, if somebody hits you with one of these, it's not going to be fun. Next. All right. These are really, these are not laws, although they incorporate some of the laws, but they're really meant for you to be safe as a pedestrian. You can see this picture of the reflective vest on the left-hand side. Not everybody has them, but people who work outside and in construction or with traffic or crossing guards or whatever would probably never be without one. And it's just because it makes you visible. Again, you should always walk on the sidewalk when there is one. When there isn't, you walk facing traffic. You want to cross the street at a corner, hopefully where there is a crosswalk. If you have a four-cornered intersection and you only have a crosswalk to two of them, that's deliberate because it means that that's the safest way for you to cross. So even if you want to cross diagonally or you go the other, it's better. The crosswalks are striped and painted there for that reason. Again, be safe, be seen, wear brightly colored clothing. It just makes it easier for the driver to see you, even if it's daytime. Please do not text or talk on your cell phone when you're crossing the street. And if you're riding a bicycle, you are never allowed to have more than one earphone in at a time. It's against the law to have more than one because you can't hear what's coming. And being able to hear is part of, keeping yourself safe. The data on people who are struck because they're on a cell phone or drivers who have crashes because they're on a cell phone is probably so undercounted because there is no way, unless you're actually observed by a police officer, that they would just put it down as a distraction. You won't know that it's from a cell phone because they can't prove that it was from the cell phone. They don't yet have laws in place that allow anybody to go into a cell phone to look for the data. And if the phone is damaged, it might not be able to get data from it anyway. If you're walking or biking at night, you should always wear some kind of a reflective garment or have stickers on your backpack, or if it's a bicycle, you can put them on your helmet. Anything that makes you more visible, because we all tend to dress in dark colored clothing. And in particular, when we go from change of seasons, it's very hard and it makes it difficult to see, like at dusk in particular. If you're a commuter and you know that for 3/4 of the year, it's going to be dark when you get off of your train or your bus, it's not a bad idea to carry a flashlight or use the light that's on your phone when you walk, just to make sure that that you know what the sidewalks look like and if they're not broken up, or so you don't step in a hole and twist an ankle or hurt yourself. It's also really a very good idea to plan your route so that anybody who really needs to, if something should happen, you should always have an emergency number on your phone. And you should just try to keep yourself safe by putting these pieces into place before you go out and let other people know that you're doing this. Next.
A few tips, sure, for cyclists. One overall thing I think is important when you're riding your bike with traffic is try to be a consistent rider. Don't speed up, slow down, swerve. Drivers I think, look at a cyclist, and they make a judgment. So the consistency helps a little bit. if I see, a guy wearing an Italian bike suit and, riding and he's got his little cap on, I think, well, this guy might go a little fast. He's probably a good bike rider and he might be aggressive, and try to beat a car, something like that, because he's obviously experienced. When I see kids riding bikes, if I see kids riding bikes on the sidewalk when I'm driving, I still slow down because they might just jet out into the street. They're very, unpredictable. I'll tell you one time, I believe I'm not sure if I was in Suffolk. I think it was in Suffolk County. I'm driving and it was a teenager just drive, and he was on the right side going with traffic the way he should. And he just decided to make a U-turn without looking at all. And if I hadn't been going kind of slow, he would have been hit. I feel like I guess, I don't know if I'm a good driver or not, but he was very apologetic, but that was his inexperience, I think, he was a teen, he's an inexperienced driver. Think a little bit about just the maintenance of your bike, ABC, air brakes and chain. Make sure, pump up your tires, as much air as you can get in them. You'll be a little bit safer, a little bit more comfortable. And tires do lose air with time. You do have to pump them up. Check your brakes, make sure that they're working. No one's going to drive if they've got bad brakes. You shouldn't be riding your bike if your brakes aren't working well. It's actually, the law actually says you have to have at least one working brake on your bike. I knew a kid when I worked down in the Rockaways. The bike had no brakes at all. He was like Fred Flintstone, putting his feet on the ground and stuff, but not, it's against the law actually. And check your chain, make sure it's greased up a little bit. But let's see. I think the tips that you see there, keep one hand on the handlebars. That's actually a law. Don't attach yourself. I remember doing that as a kid, probably to a good humor truck or something, but don't, obviously, I'm sure it's against the law, but it's an incredibly dangerous thing to do. And Cindy was right when she said, only have in one ear, but you have to be aware of your surroundings, when you're riding a bike. So you can't be you shouldn't be having a conversation on your phone, just like when you're driving. You shouldn't be, it's not a time to listen to music really, when you're riding your bike out in traffic. So there's a few tips, but look at your bike. Everybody should take a few minutes, look at your bike, make sure you got all the lights, reflectors that you need. It's in pretty good working order. And a lot of times, sometimes people buy bikes at Target or whatever. People can buy bikes wherever they want, but I get my bike tuned up once every 2-3 years, just like a car. A tune up, if your bike's decent, it's not going to cost much because they can't charge you that much. If it was expensive to get a bike tune up, you wouldn't do it. You just buy another bike. So maybe for $30-$40, you go in there, find I prefer bike mechanics. I've got a good bike mechanic who I've worked with a long time. Every now and then you feel like something's wrong, go have them check it out, throw them a few bucks, and you're going to be safer. Next.
All right, well, that concludes our formal presentation. Many thanks to our panelists, our attendees, and of course, Jennifer at South Country Library for hosting us. And now I am going to turn it over to you guys to ask any questions. And while I do that, we have some questions for you as well. Our attendees, if you wouldn't mind just giving us some feedback on these final 2 questions, asking if you learned something today, and if you think you'll feel a little bit safer armed with this knowledge that was presented today. And now I'm going to open up the floor to our attendees if you have any questions.
Actually, I'm hoping you'll all bear with me. I took a few notes.
Sure.
I'm quite the avid cyclist, painfully familiar with Bellport, and also somewhat of a crazy bicycle commuter.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to open up with the bicycle rack that was shown at the South Country Library.
Go ahead.
Worst design any idiot engineer ever came up with. And yes, I'm an engineer.
The one in the
I-
front you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
The
Oh my
post
God, the
there?
wave.
Yeah, right.
I've been trying to get my business to change over to to the old school elementary school one.
Mhm.
I can't even get them to spend multi-million-dollar company won't spend $200 for a rack. All
Well, I
right.
think Jennifer, I don't know, if he were to use the bike rack on the side, which is a good one, I guess theoretically just for employees, I have a feeling they wouldn't mind.
No, I don't think they would either.
Yeah, right.
I've been to that library. Nice people.
Yeah.
The other thing I'm going to note about South Country is the road to the east is very nice. Actually, it was repaved, I think, 3 years ago. The road to the west was paved. The road to the east is actually quite dangerous because there are splits in the road right where the cars are parked in front of the firehouse, if I got it right. And when you're coming through there as a cyclist, you actually have to get in the way of cars, take that lane to get around a good couple 100 feet of it. Not so nice.
Right.
Uh,
Is there any alternative route, or that's the way you come?
There's a little bit of alternative route, but then you're starting to introduce
Other things.
other elements of bad road and having to deal with a traffic light from an odd angle.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. They actually, unfortunately, the alternate route was just ripped up like terrible
Mhm.
from South Country Road down to the Bellport Harbor.
Mhm.
Brutal. Oh my
Mhm.
God, it must have been like 12 different crews came in there and screwed it up. I'm going to make a comment about the statistics of the accident, which is going to be a bit odd. And you got to ask you to bear with me with this one. Last year, due to all the gyms being shut down, all the bike stores were sold out
Right.
by May. Some haven't even recovered yet, which is even more astonishing. So my point on that one is some of the accidents are probably related to people who have never biked for very many years, who are now on the road and have no clue what to do.
I think you're 100% right.
Yeah, but it was such a huge number, it had to have had an effect.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And they're probably old bikes, maybe that weren't tuned up. And yeah, I think that's a very good point.
Yeah, actually, I just saw a 40-year-old 3-speed show up at the Bellport Bike Shop today.
There you go. I wish I had one.
Quite a classic. I'm going to throw the road potholes in there because of the last 3 winters. There are sections of road that are nearly unrideable. Right, I go down Horse Block near the town dump, and there are a couple spots where you actually have to take the whole lane to get around the chopped up roadway. That always amazes me because imagine that, a town of Brookhaven facility where I would imagine a town of Brookhaven official would be driving their own car.
Yeah, I know in the city, and I'm not sure about Nassau County, and I've never done it, I should, but I know in the city, when you call 311, if you report a pothole, like they have to respond in something like 48 hours, I'm not sure. But also, I do believe in Nassau County, if a pothole is reported, and then let's say, this happened to me once in my car, where it was really bad and I didn't follow up, but, broken axle or whatever. If it has been reported, then you might be able to recoup some money from the county. If it was reported and they didn't fix it, and it damages your bike, or in this case, it was my car. So I don't know. I guess I'm not really sure. My point is maybe really bad potholes really should be reported to officials, try to get on record for what it's worth,
Also, Mark, one of the hardest things is to learn whose responsibility it is as to whose road it is that it has to get fixed in the first place. And I know that Nassau County has now actually put up a website that you can put in the location and it will tell you who's responsible for that road. But it's a general consensus that the roads are in terrible shape. If you just read the letters to the editors in the newspapers, they're awful. Yeah. And in Nassau County, as you noted, if it's been reported and it's not fixed and damage occurs to your car, yes, you could call the legal department and they're supposed to be responsible, but I don't want to tell you how long that might actually take.
Okay, I got something here on that. My particular beef is always with the older storm drains.
Mm.
And I saw one that was so horrific. I put my bicycle into it, then took a picture of it. And it was a Suffolk County one on Comac Road. Sent it into Suffolk County with a little thing, time, date, location. Within 2 weeks, I think it was 12 or 15 of those storm grates in that area were revamped and cleaned up.
Well, good for you.
And but I've used that in other situations where take a picture, put the little thing, the little thing to identify it, mail it in. I think they're afraid it's a lawsuit.
Yeah.
Don't
Well,
care.
whatever it takes.
Exactly. So that's what I tell people to do when they see something so horrific. Get a picture quick. What else we got here?
I know what you just
Yeah.
mentioned is also a particular problem, and this is not a comment on motorcycling one way or the other, but
Yeah.
I know that those grates are very dangerous for.
Oh my God,
other-
the one that I put the bike in, it had rusted on the backside and moved inward towards the curb. So it had a spot that was, 3 to
Oh.
4 inches wide. And I thought about it. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna put the wheel in, take the picture, and I brought a crowbar with me to push it forward, thinking, okay, if it comes forward, having the 4 inches up against the curve is going to give people a fighting chance. And when I went to do that, the grate actually started to crush.
Oh,
I had to stop. See, now you're getting me going. There was another one on the service road and Bagatelle. This one was astonishing in this regards. It was so rusted, I was worried about bicycling over it without it collapsing. I called it in the morning because it's New York State road. I called it in the morning. 2 hours later, I get a call that, hey, this is so-and-so, Mr. Falvey. I'm at the location and I'm looking at that grate. It doesn't look that bad to me. And I know I don't want to insult the guy because he's there. So I politely said, would you drive your car over that grate? Well, yeah, I guess this one needs fixing. So it works and it doesn't work sometimes, but if you don't try, it never works.
but you know what? The more people who bike and walk, the more likely we are of getting some of this stuff repaired.
I know, but
Because-
you gotta get the word out to people on, you gotta speak up.
That's
Right.
very helpful. That's good. That's
But I
good
mean, you made the
information.
comment about the roadways. That is a brutal challenge.
Mhm.
And I've had a few instances where the buck is passed right and left.
Sure.
What is it? Long Island Service Road, South Side, before Deer Park Road. I would actually bicycle commute through there. And you can get a real good speed coming down the hill towards this light. But a couple times I passed this little pothole, maybe this big, but it was extra dark inside. And the one day I had more time, I stopped and I took a 3-foot branch to poke it down the hole to see how far it went down. I dropped it. It kept going. So now I reported it. I actually got a call a week later on, hello, Mr. Falvey, what do you expect us to do with this pothole? Which left me a little baffled on, fix it.
Yeah, right.
All right. A month later, that in a spot about 10 foot square was ripped up and a steel plate was put there. The steel plate was there for 2 years. It wasn't just a pothole.
I was, someone once explained to me, who works on roadways, that there are 2 different reasons, or even more than 2, that cause potholes. And one of them is that the water is coming from under the ground and causing,
Right,
the
eroding
ground
it.
to sink. And the other is that just wear and tear on the surface that doesn't get repaired. But the one coming from under the ground is much more serious.
Oh, big time. I've reported a number of those because you could see it collapsing,
Yes,
and getting pretty bad.
get a nice
Um,
sinkhole.
Yeah. All right. Let me not keep you guys completely tied up. Road diets. I am not happy with road diets. Here's why. The New York State engineers, boy, these guys that clearly do not ride. They tend to make the road so tight that there is no shoulder. And the only way to safely get through is to take the whole lane. Where all it needed was to, keep it down to less than a car width.
You know, we had the same comment on our last, and it was a guy up in Great Neck who, and, you know, it's
Oh, yeah.
interesting. It's actually, I'm glad you mentioned that again too,
Yeah.
because I think most people, and especially engineers, you know, they probably think of road diets from a car point of view.
Period.
So, and it sounds good. We made 2 lanes into 1. It's a road diet, but they may not be thinking about pedestrians and cyclists as much. He said
Yeah.
the exact same thing that you said, you know,
Yeah.
that it's too narrow to get through.
Actually, I've been out of this a little bit, but I saw a presentation on the completion of the work they did up in Great Neck.
Mhm.
And I looked at it. You know, I'm not one to be violent, but I'd really like to punch the guy in the nose. So we took the 4-lane road,
Yeah.
made it 2 lanes, and then put this raised monster in the middle of the roadway that was like 8 to 10 feet wide.
I think we're talking about the same thing. The guy
Yeah.
mentioned.
Yeah. And I looked at that and I was like, there was no safe way to ride that.
I think we're talking about the same area.
In Patchogue, they put a little tiny traffic circle in the west side of the road. And for the town of Brookhaven Safety Committee, I said, you know what, I'm going to ride that in all directions. And I wrote it in all directions. And I came back and I said, what a disaster. I said, the only way you're going to do that is if you successfully merge in front of a car to take your right of way into it. And I said, no bicyclist in his right mind is going to take the chance. You know, you have no escape once you're in there.
Hmm.
I'm going to hit on 2 more and then stop. On helmets, my wife often jokes, I have a perfect saying about a helmet. You only need a helmet if you have something to protect.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I'll
good.
finish up with lights. I'm hoping this one isn't too bad.
No, it's good.
This guy is made by a company out in California. It's USB rechargeable. And you've probably already seen it strobing on the front of people's bicycles.
Yeah.
Utterly phenomenal. The first few times I went to use this, I saw a road sign like a quarter mile away from me flashing. And I was trying to figure out in the dark, there's no car behind me. Where's it coming from? And I realized it was me.
Mhm.
They have an appropriate rear one that I use now during the daylight because I see more people using it. So it's
Yeah, are they expensive?
you know what? They're not really expensive. I think this was $70 or $80 for both the front and rear. And this
Oh.
particular guy is more than 5 or 6 years old, working like a champ.
Well, it's well worth it. It's well worth it.
Yeah, but well, I bicycle commute from Patchogue to Melville,
Oh,
mostly down the LA service road.
yeah. 5
And
days a week. 5 days a week.
I would try to get in 3.
Okay.
You know, it's 52 miles round trip. You know,
Uh-huh.
I often say the hardest part is getting up at about 5 in the morning to do the ride. Not the
Yeah.
ride. The ride's easy,
Right.
but I definitely need the lights. Oh, and I got one more. You made
got
a comment.
question for you when you're done.
Okay, the cost of repairs went through the roof.
Uh,
When everybody started riding, they're now talking about $100 for a tune-up
yeah,
and
I'm
2 to
sure you're
3
right.
weeks.
You would know better than me. I know.
Yeah, but that's local to my area.
Oh, right.
That was mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had read somewhere, I don't even know where, that Brookhaven, somebody started like this bike, recycling a bike type of program. They would take an old bike, you know, fixing them up, giving them to people in the
Yeah.
community. They were using some space, I think that, I don't know if the township gave them the space. It was maybe around Manorville. Have you heard anything about that?
Around Manorville.
Maybe I'm wrong about that, but
No, you might be right, because over time, there's been a few different people doing that. I have to say, I got to admit ignorance on that one.
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, no, they unfortunately the town councilwoman that was our strong supporter did not run for re-election a couple of years ago, and the town of Brookhaven has never picked it up again.
Uh-huh.
I prompted my guy to do it, but it's apparently not of interest to him.
And Brookhaven, you mentioned the township, I assume you're talking about. They
Yeah.
have a safety committee and you're on it?
No, they used to.
Oh, okay.
Oh my God, I can see her face. I'm trying to remember her name. Well, we're going over 3 years ago now that she didn't run for office, and it never got picked up again.
Okay.
Very, very disappointing. It actually was a well-represented group when it was running.
Yeah, right.
You know, it's tough.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
and
think
the worst.
there is still a traffic safety board in Brookhaven.
Well, Suffolk
Might
County
be.
has one. I don't know about.
But it's
Yeah.
in Brookhaven.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's where they meet. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of great comments and a lot of great discussion. Thank you so much for your contribution, really.
The questions and the answers are always the best part.
They are.
Actually, I'll even throw one more out there.
Please do.
If you look up my YouTube page,
Okay.
I put a little documentary on how to pack your backpack for bicycle commuting.
Is there a way that I could get in touch with you?
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
welcome all questions.
Okay.
Um,
Can I find it on your YouTube page or you have an email?
you know what? I'll just give it to you.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. This is going to sound a little funny, but it's true. IB Snake
SNAKE. Okay.
2002
Right.
at yahoo.com.
Okay, thanks. I'm gonna send you an email next week. Okay.
No problem. And if you look at my YouTube page, it's Paul O Snake Falvey.
Okay.
My friends have been calling me that for years, so I just let it ride.
Okay, thanks a lot.
But the transportation, I think it was 511 Transport or something.
Yes.
I can't remember the name of the group. They asked me to do a video and a year or two ago, and actually a number of people actually liked it.
Good.
And I've done the presentation on how I do the packing and do it to a number of the Long Island bicycle clubs.
Yeah, good.
You
Good.
do
And that-
climb? Have you ever heard of them?
Actually, I used to be a president to climb.
Yeah.
Oh,
We now have Mike Beatty, who's been doing it for 15 years. He is a powerhouse of information
Oh, yeah.
and resources.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there were some, across the islands, more so in Suffolk, and climb's a big part of the, some nice trails are coming up,
Oh my God. I find it kind of odd that the mountain bikers have done more for road biking than the road bikers.
Well, I think it's the advocacy. Yeah. You're
Yeah.
right.
yeah, they're better organized.
Yeah, they're just better.
In the city, the regular bicyclists are very organized.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
So,
All
well,
right,
thank
I
you
need-
very much, Paul.
Yeah.
Yes,
You are
thank
more
you.
than
And
welcome.
And I just have our contact information here in case you ever want to reach out.
Okay, let me grab that quick.
Sure.
Oof. Come on, let me grab it. The screen I use from my little laptop is not sized well. So I lose everything around the edges.
Oh,
It
sorry.
pisses me
So-
off. There we go. Let me do this. Perfect.
And we've just got some more resources here.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure you're aware of all of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, that concludes the presentation. Once again, thank you so much.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks, Brooke. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Nice meeting you,
Jennifer.
Paul.
Yeah.
You're more than welcome. Be well.
Yeah.
Thank you.